In real life, you only die once. There are a few exceptions, like being a certain type of jellyfish, they don't die at all. But in video games, you might die dozens, hundreds, even thousands of times. Across the globe of gaming, untold billions, perhaps trillions of deaths have occurred. What does all this death mean? In a game, death sometimes means you lose everything. And it is a wide spectrum, where you could lose every single thing that meant something to you, all the way to losing jack and shit. And when you lose nothing but the little progress you made since your last save, it can seem like death is whatever in these games. It could be summed up as a minor inconvenience at best, and that could be a little boring and stale. That's what this video is about, looking past those boring death systems and shining a light on the ways death has been utilized as more than just a minor inconvenience. Before we could delve into the truly interesting, I should look at what mini games tend to do. It's something that I like to call El Círculo de la Muerte, or the Circle of Death. Games that use El Círculo de la Muerte tend to treat death as something that provides a reset with a small penalty or no penalty at all besides time spent that you'll never get back. And while in a boring repetitive vacuum, it does serve a purpose in and of itself. Like Nicolas Cage in the movie Next or Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, repeating a scenario over and over, restarting when defeated, allows you, the player, to obtain near omniscience in some games, turning what was seemingly impossible into a breeze via muscle memory and spawn knowledge. Compare your first playthrough of Dark Souls to your second, and you'll see a marked difference in the amount that the chosen undead ends up struggling. It allows the player to go through a trial and error period where death is the game telling you to figure out what you did wrong. Games like Toho and Fury damn near require you to go into a basically unwinnable situation and die so you can get a chance to look at the patterns. And at the end of all this, you're rewarded with the knowledge to beat something that once seemed so hard. Unless you're playing Blue Dragon on the DS and you got stuck on a boss where you can't grind and then death is just really annoying. Anyway, death replays after completing a level in Super Meat Boy provides a visual representation of what I'm talking about. It might show an army of Meat Boys marching to their gory deaths, all except for that one perfect run that makes it through unscathed, victorious and better for it. But the real question we should be asking is, where are all those other Meat Boys real too? Whether trial and error is something that is actually fun is honestly another topic for another day. But past that, the game getting over it is kind of interesting because it does what I just talked about, but it doesn't have any explicit death in it. The only true death in this game is when you give up, which I'm sure a lot of people did right before looking up a speedrun of this game. But the Sisyphean task of climbing and falling in endless succession is at its barest a commentary on the role of death in games, being a minor setback in the way of success, or at the very least completion. Alright, now I'm done with talking about El Círculo de la Muerte, the most common form of death in video games. Now it's time to dive into some more interesting death mechanics. So there are some games that give deaths consequences. This can affect gameplay and when done right, are entwined with the lore of the game world. First up, many roguelikes approach death in its truest form of finality, especially the ones that incorporate generations. For example, the game Rogue Legacy. When you die, the character is dead for good and your run is over. There is no continue, for that particular character at least. Starting over fresh, you could play a new run where you do start from the beginning, but perhaps with some hand-me-down knowledge and equipment from your ancestors. Every run is different, and it makes you feel that your previous character is really gone and gives you the expectation that your character is going to die forever, because that is the nature of life. I mean, the game. The nature of the game. But that's the roguelike genre, and while it can hurt a lot to lose a character that you felt was doing really well, the runs are usually only a half hour or so, which means you can keep going and you aren't crazy attached to your previous characters.
But what about the ones that haunt your dreams?
See, some games have a hardcore or permadeath mode. Imagine losing a character in the same way as a roguelike, except that game is much longer. The last game I played with this implemented was Path of Exile, and while your character just goes back to standard mode, it just isn't the same. When longer games have permadeath, it makes players rethink how they play. You can't be as reckless because death cannot be an option. You have to be smarter, maybe even do some research like knowing there was a time where a side boss in Path of Exile could stunlock, which ruins fucking everything. Imagine getting so far into the game and spending hours on it just to die. It hurts, and I'm not going to immediately roll a new character, the wound is too fresh. Dying in these games can really be the end of that game. The next games I'll be talking about handle death in a similar fashion but execute them differently. The death mechanic in these games coming up are ones that directly tie into the gameplay and the actual story or lore of the game. Death is a big thing, we all know that, and some games take advantage of that inevitability to make their games more interesting or to introduce unique ideas. Dark Souls, the beloved poster child of death, portrays a certain madness in death, both in lore and gameplay. In Dark Souls 2 particularly, your character will become more and more zombie-like and fucking disgusting as you continue to die without restoring your humanity. And there is an actual lore reason for this, which someone like Matthew Matosis can explain in a way that I never could. What I do know is that this also reduces your total health down to half of your capacity. This makes the game harder both mechanically and emotionally, and also starts to make the player treat death as a commodity. Well, not a commodity, but more like rationing out your deaths. What I mean is that effigies don't grow on trees, or the undead, and barring rings or whatever else I'm forgetting, restoring your humanity is how you get your max health back. Now you have to decide when to actually be human again. Do you think the extra health is what's stopping you from beating that really annoying boss, or should you just rock the lower health because you know you can eventually get through it? This makes death all the more punishing when it happens because effigies are oh so precious. And while this is just for Dark Souls 2, 1 is similar enough as you can keep stacking humanities for nice bonuses, like an increased drop rate. And while you can actually farm humanity pretty easily, it still hurts to lose all of it for dumb reasons like slipping in Blighttown or some shit. While Dark Souls uses death to make players change their game-playing mentality, the next 2 games make the player look at death in a new light. Soul Reaver Legacy of Kain and Planescape Torment utilize death in their games to give the concept of death itself this air of reverence that needs to be respected, or on the opposite side, turning it on its head and showing how absolutely meaningless death is. This is especially interesting in an industry where dying is more of an annoyance or inconvenience. In Planescape Torment, your character is an immortal who loses their memory upon death. Of course, that stops happening, which leads to the events of the game. You can die as much as you want, and sometimes you have to in order to get past certain events. This takes the whole idea of dying meaning nothing in video games and just throws it in your face. And that's how it is for a lot of games, until you find out, spoiler alert, whenever you die, someone else dies in your place and becomes a vengeful spirit. This really comes into play at the end where the game gets harder depending on how many times you died. For a lot of the game, death is treated as nothing to you, just for it to be subverted and have it all turned around. Death doesn't just stop. And although it may seem like it'll always come back around one way or another. Exactly like Final Destination. Man, death is straight up a dick. Meanwhile, in Soul Reaver, death is equal to the spectral realm. And by that, I mean that when your character dies, you're sent over there, not unlike what would happen when you lose in a children's card game. Unlike the Shadow Realm, you can head over there as you see fit, which is crazy. Like, who willingly goes to a place that basically means you're dead? And don't answer that, I'm serious. But to show how powerful death is, you can't just go in and out willy-nilly. Sure, you can decide when you want to leave, but if you want to get out, you have to find a portal and you can only activate it when you're at full health. Death is not something to be trifled with, and it's illustrated by the gameplay. To get out of the Death Realm, you have to jump through hoops. And to further add to things, bosses you've already killed show up in the Death Realm and they will fight you again. Death is real, and these are the consequences of killing someone in this world. I don't really know any of the games that do this, but I wish it was done more. I don't think I'll stop there. What'd you think of the video? What are some of your favorite death mechanics that I didn't talk about? Be sure to leave it in the comments, I'd love to hear about it. And if you take away anything from this video, it's that death is pretty fun. Wait, no, wait, that's not right.